Pondering God, Chapter 67. Who needs Jesus? If any man is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Jesus, John chapter 7, verse 37. Lately, it seems, the entire mission of the church is to minister to the poor. Surely, that is something that the church should be doing. After all, Jesus had much to say about the poor. In the passage from Matthew chapter 25, he describes in painful detail what a number who call themselves followers of God didn't do when they had the opportunity. Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 through 43. Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Jesus made this application very personal and indicated that those who overlook the poor here on earth are actually overlooking him. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 5, Jesus, quoting partially from Isaiah, says, "The blind receive sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. And the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them." And so the church over the centuries has sent humble and dedicated men and women to the far ends of the earth, ministering to the poor in third world countries around the globe. People stand at kettles ringing bells at Christmas time, trying to raise money to help the poor. But are the poor the only ones who need to have the gospel preached to them? I believe that a good way to find the answer to that question is to look at who Jesus himself ministered to while he walked among us for that brief time. In Luke 19, Jesus came across a little man named Zacchaeus and invited himself to stay with him. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and a crooked one at that. He made it a practice to enrich himself by weighing down the people with extra taxes and keeping a large portion of it for himself. Much in the same way, crooked politicians today collect taxes and enrich themselves at the expense of the average taxpayer. After encountering Jesus, Zacchaeus saw the error of his ways, repented, and gave back half of what he had to the poor, and paid back to those he had defrauded 4 times as much as he took. In Luke chapter 18, Jesus encountered a certain ruler, extremely rich, who wanted to inherit eternal life. The young man, trying to justify himself to the Lord, rattled off all the commandments he had kept from his youth, thinking that this might gain him what he desired. When Jesus suggested that he sell all his possessions and give the proceeds to the poor, and then follow him, the rich young ruler counted the cost as too high and went away sad. In Matthew chapter 8, Jesus encountered a Roman centurion, a chief officer in the Roman army. With a paralyzed servant in his home, the man asked Jesus to help. When Jesus offered to go to his home and heal his servant, the centurion declined, claiming he wasn't worthy for Jesus to come under his roof. The centurion then said to Jesus, "Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." Jesus marveled at the man's faith, noting that for a man outside the Jewish religion, a Gentile pagan, his faith was greater than those in Israel. Jesus healed the man's servant. In John chapter 4, Jesus encountered a woman of Samaria, attempting to draw water from a well. After a brief conversation, Jesus offered the woman living water, himself, and then asked her to call her husband. At this, she said she didn't have a husband. Jesus then told her that she was correct in her answer, that not only had she had 5 husbands previously, but the man she currently lived with was not her husband. When the woman finally left Jesus and went back to her town, her words alone convinced others of who Jesus was, and many Samaritans believed in him because of her testimony. Finally, in Mark chapter 5, Jesus came across a man who had for years been suffering at the hands of demons. He was so strong that he couldn't be bound and was driven out of town, where he lived in the mountains among the tombs. Crying out day and night, he gashed himself with stones. Having mercy on him, Jesus drove out the demons, and the man was then in his right mind. From that day forward, the man went around the region telling everyone what great things Jesus had done for him. So, to recap, Jesus ministered to a crooked politician, a military officer, a rich aristocrat, a loose-living woman, and mentally deranged man. Who needs Jesus? This list includes more than just the poor. In Mark chapter 16, verse 15, Jesus commissioned the disciples to go into all the world and preach the gospel, or the good news, to all creation, an all-inclusive list. Everyone needs to hear the good news. The rich man on Wall Street, the senator in Washington, the prostitute in Harlem, including all those who think that because they have an abundance, they don't need anything else. There aren't any missionaries volunteering to go to the mission fields of Congress. No bell ringers raising money for the suburban housewife. And yet, they need Jesus as much, maybe more than, the poor man in Ethiopia. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 17, Jesus says this to the church in Laodicea, a church of materially wealthy individuals. Because you say, I am rich, and have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and you do not know that you are wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. Jesus' use of the word poor has multiple meanings. Yes, we are to minister to the materially poor, but we are also to minister to the poor in spirit, those who may have plenty of material things, but lack something that only Jesus can give them and often don't know they're missing. Isn't it ironic that the rich man will drop his dollar bill into the kettle because he's convinced that his money will go to help the needy, and yet doesn't realize that he himself may be the neediest? Who needs Jesus? We all do.